Hello, welcome to my podcast. So, for today's podcast, I have a dear friend of mine. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Another episode of my podcast.
Well, what I meant to say was a podcast episode where it's a working title.
No, I was referencing the meme. I'm so sorry.
Oh, right. I totally knew that. Anyways, go ahead and introduce yourself, friend.
I'm Haze. My name is Haze Baez.
Yay!
I am a dear and sweet, kind, gentle friend of Frida's.
Yes. Okay, so for today's podcast, we are going to talk about being queer and Chicana, and specifically the history of queer Chicana people.
Oh my god, we can almost relate to this.
Right?
Oh
Isn't that crazy? So, hey guys, fun fact, because you're listening and you can't see us. I'm very much Mexican, and so is Haze. But Haze is a little bit more racially ambiguous, right?
Yeah, I don't exactly, always look it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a white Mexican, but my facial features are very prominent.
Yes, of course. And we love her for it, and we will be talking about it in this podcast because we will be talking about colonialism. It's important.
I know her.
Yeah, we know her. We love her. No, we don't. That was a joke. That was a bad take. Please don't cancel me.
Being Chicana and queer is its own subculture.
Exactly.
Which is something we can get into on so many levels here, guys. Let's do. You go host.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So first of all, I'm gonna give you guys a quick brief history on the Chicano movement. If you guys don't know what the Chicano movement is, it's basically this movement that started in the 1960s through into the 1970s. It was popularized by Cesar Chavez, as you guys may know, because history tends to only talk about men in the movement. Right. Yeah. But basically it was this movement of Mexican American people that wanted, basic human rights. A lot of it was focused on labor rights, for example, the huelgas with people that were farm workers, and it was very much inspired by the Black Power movement as well at the time. And this was also when feminism was starting on its rise. I think it was around second wave feminism, and that was also on the rise as well.
I think so, because the first phase was definitely closer to suffragettes.
Yes.
If I'm remembering correctly.
Yes. She knows her history.
I do love my history. I try. And the second wave was definitely more Americanized.
Oh, for sure. Very Americanized. And also very white.
Very, very white.
And we'll talk about this further later into the podcast. But basically, the Chicano movement was this movement that was a political movement. It was just about human rights and making sure that, Mexican American people were also, given the human rights that everyone should have. And do you have anything to say?
Pretty much just because, I've read a little bit up on the Chicano movement. Pretty much just the way that America wanted to use the Mexican American people, the Mexican people specifically, to help basically build this country in a very specific way during this new age of America.
Especially after World War II.
I believe World War II where some Mexicans actually went to help defend our country.
Yes.
Were promised, basically the American dream, and then they tried to push him back.
Right. This is where you would have restaurants outside having signs like no dogs or Mexicans allowed.
Right.
During this time, it was very much people were going out and protesting. There was a lot of boycotts, famous
Zoot
boycotts.
Suits. Shout out Zoot Suits.
Shout out Zoot Suits and the Zoot Suit riots, which that could be a whole other episode in itself.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, when we talk about Chicano history and we talk about the Chicano movement, a lot of the times this movement emphasizes on historical figures like Cesar Chavez and not enough on historical figures like Dolores Huerta, which, if you didn't know, she was also a big contributor to the Chicano movement. And guys, she arguably did a lot more than Cesar Chavez did.
Oh, clock that.
And we don't talk about that enough. More importantly, we don't talk about women enough in history because a lot of the times, obviously, we know women and what they contributed to history is often erased, or at least there's this effort to erase that history. But because we're talking about being queer and Chicano, I thought it would be important to talk about queer Chicana women that had a real big effect on the Chicano movement, which leads me to us talking about Gloria y Azaldúa. So, do you know who she is, Hayes?
I cannot say that I do know who she is. Tell me
Okay,
about her.
I will tell you about her. Okay, so she is a queer Chicana writer. She's a poet. And basically, she wrote this really wonderful book called Borderlands/La Frontera, The New Mestiza. And basically, this book explores the idea of a mestiza consciousness. And a mestiza consciousness is basically like talking about how a lot of the times when we're talking about the Chicano movement, we don't talk enough about our indigenous roots. We don't talk enough about queer people, and we don't talk about how that intersects. Because a lot of the times when we talk about queerness, a lot of the times people in our community kind of equate it to whiteness and think that queerness means some type of ideology that is westernized.
Well, here's another thing that I was kind of thinking of as you were touching on this in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
The fact in that it was very like male led in at least the painting of the Chicano movement, and that like what you can title as misogyny or machismo is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what pushes that narrative of us feeling the need to be closer to white America.
Right.
Like it kind of pushes the narrative of like, well, we need to act this way and assert ourselves in this way with like the men leading it forth.
Yep.
Because you want to be closer to the American dream that is the part of the American dream that colonized you in the first place.
Exactly. It's kind of this idea where it's like pharmaceutical medicine that's like they give you a solution for the problem that they created.
Yeah.
And what Azaldúa is talking about, she is representing this idea or presenting this idea of how mestiza as it. Do you know what mestiza means, first of all?
I feel like I do, but please.
I will further explain. Yes, I will further
on
explain on this. Basically, mestiza is the half-blood children of half Spaniards and half indigenous people, because during colonization, we know that a lot of Spaniards, colonizers, came to the Americas and would have children with the indigenous women of the Americas. Sometimes it was forced, sometimes it wasn't. But as we know, this obviously created mestizo people.
Yeah, which is like a completely crazy other huge topic of like indigenous roots and blood that we could totally get into in another episode.
No, literally. So basically, okay, so Azaldúa, her writing challenges the rigid binaries of identity, and she encourages us to exist in between spaces.
Which is, I already enjoy this. I already enjoy hearing about this because, not everything has to be so definitive.
Exactly. And that's her whole thing. Her whole thing is knowing how to work between these spaces, especially because she grew up in South Texas and she grew up closer to the border where she is Mexican American, right? But also she lives in a border town like we do.
Oh my god, no
I know.
way.
She lives really close to a border just like we do.
Just like
And
us, literally, we're like 20 minutes or less.
we're 20 minutes away from a whole other country.
15 minutes if traffic is really, really light.
Exactly. That's what we're saying. So her voice is really important during the Chicano movement and still in the Chicano movement because she basically embraces intersectionality and understands that queerness isn't just one thing, right? It isn't just, a bunch of gay people that it's just their sexuality. Queerness goes beyond just your sexuality. Queerness goes into just being understanding that your identity is away from these systems that were put onto you and understanding that you're in yourself and who you are as a person is sacred in itself and understanding that intersectionality between the movement, the queer movement and the Chicano movement and how those both movements embrace the holiness, if you will, of oneself.
And what is queerness to you, Frida?
Oh, I am so glad you asked.
What does it mean to you?
Queerness to me is an identity an identity and political movement that goes beyond what we have been taught, specifically what colonization has taught us.
Oh,
because beautiful. If you think about it, with indigenous people, queerness wasn't even a word, even though historically speaking, in indigenous tribes, there would be two-spirit people that wouldn't identify with what we now know as male or female. And these people literally had such important roles in these tribes. They were storytellers, they were healers, they were people that had a very important role in tribes. And it wasn't something where now we would call it being non-binary, but these people were just, they weren't defined by their sex or what they liked. They were defined by their role in their tribe. And to me, queerness is just embracing that idea. It's embracing that we in ourselves have to go by no labels. We can just be. And queerness is an embrace of that. And that's what queerness means to me.
Beautiful. I love that answer.
What does queerness mean to you, Haze?
Oh my god.
It was gonna come up. It was gonna come up, guys.
Yeah, I know.
It was gonna
of course, of course. Well, just to like really quick, like just like add a comment on everything you said because I really loved it. With non-binary people and looking back historically on like people who didn't conform to a specific gender identity, and that's just so like amazing to me. It's just because it's like, yeah, you're just there, you exist in peace. It is what it is. That's great. This whole narrative that people want to push that the English language is gendered, but if you really take a look at it, like literature wise, especially like specifically from the 1920s to now, we've created this gender bias,
right?
Because we've set up these roles through colonization,
right?
And through
yes,
misogyny, and through this whole American dream system that is not as bright and lovely as it seems to be.
Exactly.
So it's just made up in a very large, complicated sense that is just a big ball of yarn that's probably very, very hard to undo.
Yes.
But queerness to me, and let me talk about my sexuality real quick.
But yeah, we were gonna talk about this as queer people.
Of course. As somebody who spent, and we're 20 now. We're gonna be 21 this year.
Exactly.
As somebody who spent majority of my teenage years questioning myself in the sense in which I felt so heavily I needed to have a label. Like I needed to have a label to be valid in my queerness, in my identity, so I can step out into that community and say, look at me, this is who I am.
Yep.
However, I was like 18, 17, pretty much 18, when I had realized this, when this was really weighing on my mind and I was coming to ease with it, when I kind of just reached a point of well, what if I just stop caring?
Mm,
What if I just exist and I don't say that I'm anything? And when people talk to me, I can technically put a label on it, like queer or
right.
bi, and I'll explain it to people and they'll further try to push that. Well, but then technically wouldn't you be this? Wouldn't you be this? I just I just like who I like. I love who I love. I am
Exactly.
drawn to the people that I'm drawn to, and I think that is the most important part of it. I think queerness overall to me is just letting the existence of humanity happen. Just like, and that can go with so many things, but just let it be, let it exist. I felt like some people prefer to have a label, but
Right.
letting that go was when I was like, yeah, I'm queer.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And like queerness is where this idea goes that it just goes beyond having to abide by a system that likes to put labels on everything. And it's more of just like acknowledging that, yeah, like I like who I like and that's it. I don't abide by the system. I think it goes the same thing with like identifying with being like non-binary. Like you are quite literally going beyond a system that has been in place. And this system, again, was created by colonization, which is something that Azaldua talks about in her book that she wrote. Um, and
Hmm.
it's actually really, really, really interesting. She says how she connects, Chicano and queerness. She says Chicanos need to acknowledge the political and artistic contributions of their queer. People listen to what your joteria is saying. The mestizo and the queer exist at this time and point on the evolutionary continuum for a purpose. We are a blending that proves that all blood is intricately woven together and that we are spawned out of similar souls. Dun dun dun. I mean, I just really, really, really like that sentence. And
Yeah.
it just speaks to how she thought about this and the mestiza consciousness of it all, the framework that she has for understanding queerness and understanding how queerness goes hand in hand with the Chicano movement. And honestly, how queerness just goes beyond the Chicano movement, but also like any movement that is for the justice of an oppressed people. And it just really, 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 really speaks on her framework, which I really enjoy. Next up, we have Cherry Moranga. She's a queer
Oh.
Chicana playwright, poet, essayist, and activist whose work challenges the norms of feminism and cultural nationalism. Moranga is best known for co-editing This Bridge Called My Back Writings by Radical Women of Color, an anthology that gave voice to women marginalized by mainstream feminism, which was we were just talking about right now. Moranga writes passionately about the intersections of race, gender, and sexualities in her essays, like La Huera, where she discusses her experiences with privilege and oppression. Her honesty and vulnerability invite readers to confront their own biases and complicity in systemic inequality. Moranga also critiques the Chicano movement for its exclusion of women and LGBTQ plus people, calling for a more inclusive approach to activism. Her plays, such as Heroes and Saints, highlights issues like environmental justice and community resilience through the lens of Chicana identity. Through her writing and activism, Moringa bridges queer Chicana identity with broader social movements, again like the Chicano movement, and demanding justice not just for some, but for all. How might her work influence the way we approach activism today, Haze?
Oh my goodness. Well, just the fact that she's a playwright right off the bat is
I know, that's
that's
what.
media.
Yes.
That's media. That's pushing activism within your artistry. And that is something that is just never going to die within the people. That's something that's never going to change. And there may be things that, create a struggle with that. For example, like AI.
Yes.
But one thing that is never going to change is people are going to remain passionate.
Mm,
Want to, people are always going to have humanity within them. And part of that is, well, how can I help? What can I do to maybe open someone's eyes to keep my space that I have created? I've dug this hole. I get to stay here. This is my home.
Right.
And there's so many great, wonderful people who use art to do that. And people don't remember that books and plays, playwrights, things like this is original media. This is the media. It's, you can make as many infographics you want on Instagram and Canva. But that was, what pushed activism forward.
Yup.
Artistry and creation, and that's what it is, and to its core.
Yeah, I was going to actually mention another artist. Her name is Alma Lopez. She's a queer Chicana visual artist who provocative works challenges social norms and reimagines.
Sorry.
Well, she reimagines cultural icons. I will show you a picture of her work right now. She basically makes like this beautiful paintings of La Virgen de Guadalupe, Virgin Mary, and she reimagines.
Who's Mary? That's Guadalupe.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
That's a whole nother topic too.
Yes, and like the touch of religion. Her art is beautiful. I've seen her art in person, and I've seen it through a Chicano class that I had. And her art is just, I will show you a picture right now.
I think that, like religion, oh my goodness, that's beautiful. Oh, I love that.
Yes. So,
that makes me feel some type of way.
For
the people,
yes, for the people listening, basically, it's the Virgin Mary. If you haven't seen, she's this Virgin Mary. Look her up on Google. You will know, but most of y'all will know who she is. She's just that girl. But she is basically with a mermaid, and the mermaid, if you ever played Loteria before, La Sirena, yes, she is basically kind of like caressing her, and they're kind of like lovely, like just looking at each other and being just girls together, you know what I mean?
To then touch on religion within the Chicano movement,
right?
Because that was a big thing as well.
Yes, it was
religion, and that religion being, of the people who colonized you in the first place, and then having to separate and create a space in which it's like, but this is how we see this religion, like taking it and still keeping it a part of you even after the fact, being colonized from that religion,
right?
And then keeping it as something so close to yourself, because a lot of white American Catholics would say Virgin Mary, and majority of Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Chicanas, they would say Guadalupe.
Right, yeah. And actually Lopez talks about this, where she says that she sees La Virgen de Guadalupe as a strong, queer, and unapologetic figure. Now, if you don't know the story of La Virgen de Guadalupe, I will give you a brief explanation.
Oh my god, yay.
But basically, she is this young girl who has the baby of Jesus Christ, and she has this baby. Yeah, she was God's it girl. She basically gives birth to this baby without having sex with a man because she's a virgin. And her whole thing was, she wasn't gonna give herself to a man. And I mean, that sounds pretty queer to me. Like, right.
And also just the fact, if you look at Jesus in general, she raised him to be a very gentle, kind, loving soul.
Exactly. And her in herself, during an era where women were expected to have the kids of a man and they didn't really have a say in it, she was really outspoken for the way that she said, yeah, you're not having sex with me, basically, and I'm having God's kid. That's basically what she was doing.
Yeah.
So and she was young too. So literally it was just speaks to her outspokenness and just her being a feminist, dare I say. This brought a lot of controversy when she came out with these pieces because, obviously people feel very connected to their religion. And
Mm-hmm.
some people thought this was offensive to portray La Virgen de Guadalupe in a way that they didn't want her to be portrayed. But Lopez says that she thinks of La Virgen de Guadalupe again as a strong, queer, and unapologetic figure. She stood by her work, and she emphasizes the importance of representing marginalized identities in art, which we were just talking about.
And also, like, just to touch on that too, like, she's supposed to be like mother. She's the
Yes,
mother. So, and what happened to all of us being God's children?
exactly.
Why do you have to inherently take something that is queer and boil it down to something that is sexual?
Yes, exactly. And Lopez really in her work, uses the sexual, not she uses Lopez in her work uses bodies as not in a sexual matter, but in a matter to represent just one's holiness and one's,
Mm.
queerness, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, just the sacred of being oneself.
It is a very common theme within the queer community to be so open and just respectful about everyone's bodies and the way that they look.
Exactly.
It's a very big thing in the queer movement, just overall. So
I
that
know.
makes a lot of sense in how it would line up with religion in that way.
Exactly. And just the understanding of like, yeah, like one's holiness and connecting that to religion is just so interesting to me. And Lopez also talks about the importance of art in like social justice movements and understanding how art in itself can be a rebellion or a tool for rebellion and going against the status quo that was created by colonization. And again, we were just talking about this, but art is such a powerful tool that really is like a universal language, in my opinion, where anyone can see a piece of art and interpret it differently. But again, it speaks to different people, it gives different perspective, and it just offers, again, a tool for decolonization, might I add, because for colonization, a lot of the times it was just creating these systems where people had to go by a certain European standard. But with art like this, like Lopez's art, or with our previous person's art, it goes beyond that. They have a choice in how they want to represent their community, and they're able to do that through their art.
Yeah, and if you're looking at a piece of art and it makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should really think to yourself, well, why does this make me uncomfortable? And is it for the wrong reasons?
Right. And I just love art.
I love art too. As an artist,
Right.
I
Yes.
ugh,
Art is so important, and especially in this political climate where it feels like everything is being policed. Our bodies are policed. The way that we are taught is being policed as well. Art is just one of those things where you cannot police art as much as you try.
again,
People are
yep.
going to find a way to make it happen, and it's going to work, and you can't stop an artist from being an
When
artist.
you push when you push humanity into such a small confined box, people are powerful emotionally, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where you are, no matter who you are, people are powerful when it comes to their emotions. And when you push somebody down into something small enough and they can't handle being small anymore, they're going to find outlets in which to not make themselves feel small. And a lot of that is within art.
Mm-hmm. And that is just, again, it speaks to the importance of art, and art has such an important role in any social justice movement,
In history
in
in general.
history in general. And it just goes beyond with what you are taught. It just is, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is always just a beautiful thing. Anyone can be an artist. You can express yourself however you want to, and someone is going to understand it, and they're going to interpret it in many different ways, but your message will eventually get across.
And just also, if you're trying to learn more about history, look up art pieces around this time, look up art pieces around that country that you may be studying in that era, because nothing, and literature, because nothing will enlighten you more and make you connect to these people that lived, could be hundreds of years before you or decades before you, but nothing will make you connect more to that person than going and discovering what that art is or what that literature is and just taking it in. Because, like War and Peace, for example, it's this crazy huge long book that touches on the political climate at the time of the war that was happening on the time, and it is fictional, but it's based on real historical things. Like, based on that, you won't, like, if you want to understand somebody, read their diary. Like,
right.
Don't, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yes.
That's what art is. It's just emotion being put into something specific.
Beautiful. Out of our 3 Chicana figures, which is, again, a reminder to the listeners, Gloria Y. Azaldúa, a queer Chicana writer, poet, and scholar; Cherry Morenga, a queer Chicana playwright, poet, and essayist; and Alma Lopez, a queer Chicana visual artist. Who is your favorite that you've heard of so far?
It's really great that all of these women, all of these queer artists are so individual in the things that they've created to help push their movement and push their beliefs or whatever they felt that they were trying to accomplish at the time. They conveyed that emotion through their creation. I would have to say that Alma's probably my favorite that I've heard of.
Shout out, Alma.
Shout out. But they're also special in their own specific they're also special in their own specific intricate ways and what they have created and the narrative that they were trying to push and fight for. All the work they did is important. All of the media that they have put out there is important to our history.
That was so beautifully said.
What's your
wonderful.
Favorite that we've talked about? Who's your favorite that we talked about?
Okay, honestly, again, like you said, I love all of these Chicana artists. They are just so powerful in the work that they've done. But for me, Gloria Azaldúa is just one of those people that like changed the way that I thought. I learned about her in class, and I learned about her work and about her framework of mestiza consciousness, and it really like changed my perspective of how I see queerness and how I see my identity as not only a queer person but as a queer Chicana person, and how those things intersect and how they are not separate things, and how like Azaldúa said, creating that bridge between queerness and my identity as a Chicana woman is very like powerful to me, in the sense where I can see that my queerness is not just my sexuality, but it's just who I am that I can use as a tool for decolonization. Because queerness in itself is a way to fight decolonization and is a way to fight the ideas that colonizers have brought onto my people and to my ancestors. Because again, like we've mentioned before in the beginning of this podcast, queerness wasn't a word in indigenous communities because queerness was just what it was. It just is. It just was. And a lot of the times, queerness was demonized by colonizers because it went against their status quo, and it was used to try to attempt to wipe out a whole people. But queerness still existed within these tribes, and to me that is like just sacred, and like it's just one step closer to just my indigenous roots. But
That's awesome.
Yeah. So shout out Azaldúa, shout out to her.
I'll have to read her book.
Honestly, it was really good. I like the way that she would talk about just like this bridge between people, and she, you know, also is like bilingual, and like reading her work in English and in Spanish, where I was like, whoa, like I can understand what she's saying. There's just words in Spanish that you can't translate into English that you're just like, okay, queen, like I get exactly what you're trying to say. Like I know what you are me, I am you type esque. That's what I really enjoyed about her. So yes, to those who are listening, check her out. So, Haze.
Yes.
Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. You know, I can go into so many different sectors of history and colonization and the Chicano movement and just everything. I could talk about it forever, but history is important. Art is important, media, literacy, all of that is important. It is not just science and mathematics that is what makes us who we are. And I think that colonization in general, colonizers are people. They are people, and they're people who obviously very desperately want power, power over other people or power in general. But the thing is that they are trying to put that against other people. And these historical movements, in this sense, and the books you read and the art you consume, the music you consume, all the media you consume, by these people actively trying to be against this colonization in a sense, that is their power. Because at the end of the day, we are all people, and a person who wants power may not get that out of somebody who wants to keep theirs. It never really works out the way that you want it to, guys. There's been world wars about this, quite literally.
Right.
There are ways to undo colonialism starting in your brain first.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Literally. Literally. And it's what, again, like, guys, this is what all it like intersects. This is why intersectionality and understanding it is so important, because all these women understood the importance of understanding intersectionality, and they brought that onto their work, because they understand that if more and more people see how all of our identities intersect and how we will all benefit from decolonization and from the end of just having hierarchies, they will understand that we are truly like one people. Like at the end of the day, all of us are going to benefit from this. And it's so important to bring that into whatever work you do, whether it's playwrights, whether it's art, it's books, literature, all of that intersects. And it's very important to include that in any work that you do.
Yep. That's beautiful.
Okay, so I think with that, we are finally done. I know.
There's nothing else to talk about.
We could go on and on about this, but yeah, that is so important. It is so important, and I'm glad I got to tell you more about these important queer, feminist Chicana icons.
I'm so excited and happy that I got to hear about it.
All right, so I think that's where we end, right?
Yeah.
Yay! Make sure you guys like and subscribe. No, guys, check out these people. I will have links to, you know, articles about these people and, you know, their importance. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
I hope so too.
This has been Frida
and Haze,
and I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. Okay, go support a queer Chicana person. Go! Do it! Now! Do it!